The federal government says it is making moves to better protect Canadians' privacy. It's laying out a new bill to address how private sector companies use your personal information. The bill includes obligations for companies to protect children's data. It also outlines the right to ask for the deletion of deepfakes or unauthorized images, and it includes steps to eventually address surveillance pricing, which uses consumer data to adjust how much someone pays for a specific product or service. To talk more about this piece of legislation just tabled recently, I'm joined now by the Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation, Evan Solomon. Hello, Minister.
Great to see you, Catherine. You're right. Just tabled about an hour ago.
Yeah, so we're still digging through this, but I want to get to some of the highlights because privacy is an issue on a lot of people's minds. Canadians could demand firms delete their personal data under this new bill. Tell me how that would work.
So quickly, the frame on this, last week, about 10 days ago, we had the AI National Strategy, AI for All. You and I had a great conversation about it. And there were three pillars of that: trust, opportunity, and sovereign control. So pillar one is trust. We really believe that this technology, there's a lot of concerns, and we want to address them. So trust is first. Last week, we had the safe social media piece of legislation to restrict access to social media and some chatbots to under the age of 16. Today we tabled the Protecting Privacy and Consumer Data Act. And it really will do what the Prime Minister and I said last week. We're going to protect your children, protect your privacy, and protect your personal information. And among those key things is the right to deletion. So the right to deletion, essentially, if your personal information is used in, let's say, a deep fake, someone does one of those synthetic images about you or someone, you should have the right, and you will under this law, to demand that that is taken down. That is the right to deletion, because that will be an abuse of your personal information. And we are setting up a regulator that will be able to enforce that with penalties.
So this is what I want to understand, because you gave us the 10,000 feet there, but on an individual basis, obviously this is going to take some time, and we'll get into that in a minute. But let's say the legislation is passed, the Digital Safety Commission is in place, all this good stuff. What happens? There's a deep fake out there. I'm unhappy. Do I go to the company? Do I go to the Digital Safety Commission? How quickly does it happen? Paint me a picture.
Right. So, if the bill passes, and we can take action to protect kids and privacy and personal information, you'll have action on surveillance pricing, access to make sure that algorithms or computers that are making decisions about your mortgage or your job, and that will be transparent. And then you have the right to deletion. So how would that work? You have two options. One, you could complain right to the commissioner. So the regulator, someone could phone the regulator or email the regulator and literally demand that it gets taken down. The regulator would go to the provider, and they are obligated in the law to take it down as quickly as possible in an expeditious fashion. So they have to do it, and that is enforced by the regulator. So I'll just give you a sense of, has this been done before? There's other jurisdictions that do it. We have, in the case of intimate sexualized imagery, we've got a law that criminalizes the non-consensual sharing of sexualized imagery. For intimate sexualized imagery, there's a 24-hour period where that has to be taken down. That's not necessarily, we're not prescribing the time here, but the law says it must happen in an expeditious fashion.
Okay, so it's going to rely on this regulator. So too will your plan for inappropriate surveillance pricing, is how you've described it. In that case, it seems that the surveillance pricing idea not so much mentioned in the bill. The regulator is going to have to do some work on it. You've called this price gouging. It's going to take 18 months to set up a regulator. You've got to pass the legislation. The regulator's got to decide what's going on here. How satisfied can Canadians be with the government saying, this is a problem, we're going to fix it, but you're not going to see any action for 2+ years?
Well, first and foremost, this is the first time in Canada that we will have a regulator that will actually be able to have enforcement, penalties.
In 2 years.
Well, we got to set it up. I mean, we got to make sure that this is done right. We're setting it up for the safe social media. This is going to be a robust, independent regulator that will have the ability to enforce companies to make sure they're not abusing our personal information. Seems reasonable. The right to deletion or surveillance pricing. Now, we don't use the term surveillance pricing in there for good reason, because we want to make sure that, there are some things that individual pricing works. For example, Canadians use rewards programs to get food. We don't want to penalize people for collecting points so they can get a discount rate on food or services. That's not surveillance pricing, that's a rewards benefit. But we are clear that if the harms outweigh the benefits and there's an abuse of an individual's information, that a reasonable person, the reasonable person's test, would assume you're abusing my information, you're price gouging, the regulator can step in and it can impose fines and can fix it. That's really important. Now, in between the time that this gets royal assent and the regulator is set up, the current laws that we have been functioning under, it's called PIPED, our current privacy laws, will still be enforced. The Office of the Privacy Commissioner is still here. Those are all still enforced, so Canadians still have protection.
But they don't prevent surveillance pricing, and you said yourself in your scrum earlier today, they don't really have teeth that people have been calling for years and years.
Well, this is exactly why we're setting up the regulator. This regulator will have enforcement. That's why we're setting it up. We're doing so, obviously, as quickly as it can. I will just say, Catherine, as this bill gets debated and there'll be royal assent, the process to set up the regulator is in full force. We will have the ability to move certain provisions, like aspects of this bill, over to the regulator as it's getting set up. Okay. And I will just say this to you, because you're asking about surveillance pricing. As the minister, my first act when this bill has royal assent and the regulator is set up, I will be asking the regulator to publicly come up with guidance, that's what I'm allowed to do, guidance on surveillance pricing so Canadians have clarity on that.
Okay, I do want to ask you about one other thing related to your file. A piece of legislation that you mentioned earlier, right, which is the Safe Social Media Act. BC Premier David Eby has called this bill a miss when it comes to addressing AI chatbots, because it doesn't require tech companies to report users concerning interactions to police, right? And unfortunately, we all look to the tragic example of Tumbler Ridge, where the company didn't flag it. But why not say, for these most concerning behaviors, it should go to the level of police? David Eby says he doesn't trust these companies, essentially. I'm paraphrasing here, but what we don't, their concern is to their shareholders. Why shouldn't it go to the authorities who are interested in public safety?
So, again, you mentioned Tumbler Ridge. Obviously, the tragedy goes on. There's a legal action that the families are taking. I summoned OpenAI, not only their senior team, but Sam Altman, their CEO and founder, and demanded that they open their safety protocols for assessment to our Canadian AI Safety Institute, which, by the way, we doubled their budget in the AI strategy, and they are currently working on it. But the Safe Social Media Act is one of the first acts in the world that will put regulatory frameworks around these new things called AI chatbots. And they will still be subject, and the companies that create an AI chatbot will still be subject to rigorous duties of responsibilities to protect children, to prevent harm from coming up for children, and to disclose transparency on what they're doing to protect children. So,
but why not make them contact police? What if you are missing an opportunity to save lives here, Minister?
So, as you know, I demanded that OpenAI not only work with the Canadian AI Safety Institute, but one of the questions I had I demanded was, instead of when you escalate a threshold to police, it has to be to local Canadian authorities. Before, they were escalating to U.S. authorities. But how they escalate in their safety protocols, they now have a responsibility to protect children and to make sure that there is transparency and to avoid harms to children. And this is the first and really most robust regulatory regime around including these AI chatbots as one aspect of it.
Okay. We're going to have to leave the conversation there for today. It's a busy day. Thank you for making time for us.
Always good to chat.
Minister of AI and Digital Innovation, Evan Solomon.